Good morning, everybody. I was just giving directions to Pam. This is what we've got to do. So jazzing around. A bit late. We should have been doing it an hour ago or half an hour ago. Anyway, remember last week we were at a stage where we got our little box frame done. We got all that done, and somebody asked me about the router bits and pieces that we use, if I could show them again. So first thing up, we're going to get Pam just to hone in on the bits and pieces that we've got in here. This was the little tray full of bits that we used. Actually, there's one missing. So we had, I've got the Allen key in there because the Allen key was used for when we tightened up the grub screw in the router bits. So we had our two router bits that we cut our dovetails with. We have the reducing collet for the router bit, for the router, and then we cut our trenches in the bottom with our rebate cutter and the bearing, and we used the big Allen key. And then we used a TSRW 12 to cut our feet, and then we used a rounding over bit. Now there's a choice, the 4 or the 6, depends on what you want on here. I'm going to use the bigger one on the top edge, but the smaller one I've used in here just to round over and soften that edge in the bottom of there. And we're going to use that, which is our panel raising bit. We're going to use that today. We're also going to use this one here, which is our bullnose bit. This is the TB7. It's designed to cut a little rebate or a little bullnose on bits and pieces. Now, I'll show you where that is, or where that's going to be used. That's going to be used to round over the top edges of our sleeves that we've got in the box. So, they're all the bits and pieces. Of course, there was a piece of chalk, and we're going to use the TSRW 5 to actually cut the top off the box. So they're the bits. Now, while you were sleeping, I'm going to show you all of this stuff because we're going to sort of revert to each of the bits and pieces. Now, remember I said to you, one of the things that I found going back to something that we demonstrated in 2020, and we've done little bits and pieces on the way through from 2020 right through to today, I still forgot some of the things that I needed to do and some of the techniques to build this little box. Now, it's the simplest little box that we have, and so over the period of trying to sort of put together a program for you, I've had to make a number of boxes. Now, as you can see, I've got a few on the desk here, on the bench here, and I've been going through them, and I'm not happy with most of them, but there are a couple that I am happy with. So I'll just go through what I've done at this stage. So originally what I did was I built the framework, right? And then once I've got the framework done, I've cut the top off, and I've put inserts in 3 of those little boxes. I've cut the tops off and done a little bit of work for each of them. So I'm going to go back to each one of these during today's program and show you where we're up to with each of those. Now, they've all got different coloured bays in them. This is the one we're going to be starting on. I've cut frameworks to go in some of these, and there's some bits that I haven't finished, which I'll show you how it go about. And this one here is a box that we've cut the top off. I haven't cut the top off yet. We've just glued it up and sanded it. Now, gluing process is time consuming, so I'm going to avoid that and not do that on the show. You've seen me glue things up before, so I'm just going to sort of stick to just basically doing the woodwork bits and pieces on the thing without all the hard gluing and waiting and all that sort of thing. So let's put these aside, and we'll work our way through each of the parts Incidentally, this is what the little box looks like with the sleeves already in it. The sleeves are removable, and I make them removable. I don't glue them in. They're removable so that you can take the bits out and you can clean the inside of the box if you wish. So that's what it looks like, and it actually locates the lid really nicely, and you get this lovely little box. It still has a little bit more work to be done on it, but what I need to do is we need to go through the process to get to here. Getting to there, what we need to do is we need to make a top, we need to make a bottom. Last week's program, we did all the preliminary work to get it to that stage. So now it's to do the rest of it. So, when we had it taped up to cut the inside, we measured, and there's the numbers there, we measured the size of the base and the lid. And I had some material. This was the material we had, silky oak. Had a comment from John Parra about a combination of different timbers, and he actually likes little boxes that have a combination of timbers. Now this one's got a different sort of lid on it, of course, but it's got different combinations of timbers. You don't have to have all pale timbers. It's just my customer has asked for a box with silky oak and jacaranda in it, and that's what I'm doing. So doing up boxes or little boxes with different coloured timbers actually adds a little bit of spark to some of the boxes, and you know it just makes them look a little bit nicer. So that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure. I've got 90 by 91. That's that'll be 90 across there, and when we turn it around this way, it'll be 91 that way. Okay, so it's just not quite square, but it's pretty close to it. It's only a ½ millimetre out. So what I do is I'll cut both pieces at the same time. Now this is 4mm, this is going to be the base, and this is 10 millimetres thick, which is going to be the lid. Now I did cut the end of that square. Just got to make sure that's right. So I'm going to cut the length at 91. Okay, so just make sure, I've only got one mark, don't need to mark both of them. Over to the drop saw. Just make sure we're flush on both ends. A bit of light on the subject. Two little bits. Now I'm going to trim off one edge just to make sure it's perfectly square on the edge. So I'm only taking the tiniest little bit off. So it's just a trimming. If I didn't have the drop saw, I would use plane and just plane that edge off. So if you don't have a drop saw that will actually do what I've just done, just doing this at 90mm. I'm just going to check that measurement first. 91 by 90. So many times I make that mistake of cutting the wrong one. So we're 90mm wide and we're 91mm long. Now I've just got to check measure. 91 by 90, they're both the same. So now it's just a matter of, we've got to round over the corners of it first. So over to our little sander. Both pieces. So now what I've got is I've got the corners rounded over to the diameter of our rebate cutter. Right. So now it's just a matter of try it, see if I can fit it. What am I looking for? That's what I'm looking for. When you pull your box apart, it's always a good idea to support your timber, support your joints. A little bit of a wriggle. Now if you've not tested your jig and your joints are a little bit tight, it's probably a little harder to get it apart than I just did there. Now if it doesn't fit one way, this way. Oh, it's a better fit. Now what I'm looking for here is to make sure that my joints, when I squeeze it together, squeeze up. You can see there's a tiny little gap there. See that little gap? I'm not happy with that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim a little bit off the length of the box, the length of the piece of timber. I'm just going to trim the tiniest little bit off. I think it was the length. Yes, it was the length. So it's just the smallest amount. No need to recut the corner when you take such a small amount off. It's that there, wasn't it? What has happened here? So now I have a perfect joint. Okay, so the joints have come right in close. I'll turn it over, it's exactly the same on the other side. My joints are close in here, so that side's right. Okay. Now it's important here to make note of which way you have that in. Remember that piece of material was 91 by 90. And I've just trimmed a little bit off it, so obviously now we're back to 90 by 90, but I still want to make sure that when I put this base in, my grain runs towards my dovetail ends. Okay, so it runs this way. I don't want to put it in the other way. What I have to do now is I have to do exactly the same trim on the top piece, because the top piece is going to go in there, and if it's going to spread the thing apart a little bit, well then that's not going to help trying to fit the thing back together. So I've just trimmed a little bit off that as well. Now what I have to do is I have to cut a rebate. This one's the box. A rebate around so that we get everything nice and flush on the top of the box. Okay, so that's going to fit into there. So I have to cut a rebate around the top edge. And you can see all these little skills that I've gone through, and I just disregard them, or not disregard them, but I just don't do them often enough to be able to just do them like that. So now to do my rebate, my pun raising bit, you get carried away with other tasks, and if you don't keep up with the things that you need to do. Now, this is where we have a LARK tool. Incidentally, if you're after a radius jig, like my little green one over there, just give us an email. They're not on that website at the moment, but so what I'm doing there, I'm measuring to the top of the trench. So you can just see it's on 6mm, or just under 6mm to the top of the trench. This is where you need a sharp pencil, and my big blunt one that I've got in my pocket doesn't work. So I'm going to set my depth there. So that little piece there is what's going to fit into the trench. I'm going to put a rebate around the top of it. Actually, I'm going to do it the other way around. I'll measure it with this marking here. I don't want that on the outside of the box. It's nice, plain and clean on the outside, so I'll be doing my cut on that side. Okay. Set my my 6mm. So it's just across the top of the two cutters. I'll just set that on there, and it's actually a little bit low, but that's okay. That'll leave me a little bit more room, and it'll give me a little bit of adjustment as well. So I'll leave that like that. And I've got my fence. I'm going to have to swing my table around a little bit so that Pam can get some light on what's going on while we're setting up. Now my depth of cut. In the box, the distance in the box there, that's a 5mm trench. Okay, so 5mm deep. When we measured, we allowed for a 0.5mm gap around it so that you can get expansion and contraction of the material. So you've got to take that into consideration when you work out how much you're going to cut off here. Now, when I cut this, most of the time, this is generally a set measurement because I do this all the time. I measure in around about 8mm, right? And I do my cut there. The reason for the 8mm is because when we've got the round over on the edge of the bit here, it gives us a little gap. Show you one of the boxes. It gives us a little gap around the outside of it like that. If you don't have that gap there, you have to cut a square corner. You can use our tenor cutter to do that, and you'll get a nice fitting piece without the gap. But for this exercise, because this box is built this way, this got a little curve in there. Now, if you don't have the gap there, your box won't close up because the top edge of the trench, this top edge here, will bind on the radius of that curve. So it's just important that you add that little extra so that you do get your gap, and it gives another little feature to the box as well. Okay, just let me set this. I'm going to set it at 8mm. I'll bring my fence over to the... Now what you can do here is you can take a little bit less off, given that you've got a 0.5mm spacing there. I think I tightened that up. Okay. If you're not confident with your measurements and the way you've set it up, then by all means do a test piece. I've done it so many times now, even though I've forgotten how to do some of the other things on it. This one is an easy task. Okay. Push block. I would normally put the dust extractor on, but I'm not going to do that this time. I'll just turn it down a little bit, and that way at least Pen can get at it. Ears on, everybody. So when you do your test piece, when you do your test piece, have the box pulled apart, of course. And what this is going to go in the top, you can see I readjusted. I have to readjust now because that doesn't quite fit in there. Okay, so I've got to take a little bit more off our step there. So I need to take a bit more off, so if I just bring it up a tiny bit. Yeah, my router is having conniptions at the moment. There we go. I'll take too much off. Just doing a reset just a little bit. So I've got that fitting in there nicely now. It could probably be a little bit more snug than that, but that's okay because you want to be able, the timber to be able to move around in the trench. Actually, I might just take a tiny bit off that and leave it as is. Now, when you do your first cut, the grain on this piece of timber runs this way. Do your first cut along there, just in case you have any tear out issues on the end of your piece of timber. So if you're using something that's a little bit more open grain than silky oak, then it's, that might be a good idea. Just do the end grain first. That's a better fit. Now there, across the back of it. Now, I did say I had reset it and took a little bit off it. This may not fit, we'll just see how it goes. End grain. Important thing, take that out, otherwise you can't get it apart if it's a bit too tight. There we go. There's a perfect fit, and as you can see there's a little bit of movement there, which is good. So when we glue that together, it'll come up quite nice, and you can see there's a nice even trench all the way around. My joints are close together. They're good there, they're good there, they're good there, and they're good there, so everything fits together. So it's just a matter of now gluing that box together. Now I'm not going to glue it together now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the one that I did glue together, and I sanded, and what we're going to do now is we're going to cut the top off this one. Alright, so normally what I would do is I would glue it together, and then I would let it sit for 12 hours. So I let the glue set, harden and set, and then I would plane sand and finish the box so that all my joints are nice and flush, and the top and the bottom are flush as well. Okay, so that's what the box would look like once you've got it all sanded and finished. Now I'm not going to go through the sanding process because that's going to take half an hour too. I don't want to take that much time on it. And once you have that done, it's then time to take the top off. Now when we used our variable joint spaces, the thickness of those two joints, and I showed you how to use that last week, is 4 millimeters. Now you can use a number of different ways of actually cutting the top off. You can cut it off by hand, you can cut it off with a bandsaw, you can cut it off with whatever saw that you feel that you can use. You can use the drop saw, you can use a table saw. I prefer to use a router, basically because number one, I don't have a table saw, and number two, I find it a little bit more accurate than all the other tools that you may want to use. So we need a fence. A short fence is probably the best for this. That's tight. And then we're going to cut this in two parts, or two processes. I'm going to do half the thickness of, or thereabouts. So about half the thickness. That's all we need to do there. And then we're going to judge about centre. If you want to be really pedantic about it, get your ruler out and have a go at it, but it's not really necessary. So line that up on my router bit, to the centre of the router bit. The variable joint spaces, because they gave you 4 millimeters of extra space in that larger joint, now we're going to take that out. Because the TSRW5 is a 4 millimeter router bit. Now, the thing about the TSRW5, it's a little router bit. If you're using hardwoods or something that's tougher than jacaranda, you may find that if you push too hard you're going to snap the router bit off. Now there's a few people who are watching that have actually done that because they've rung me and said I broke a router bit because I pushed too hard, or I dropped it. If you drop it on the floor, 9 times out of 10, because it's a very small router bit, you tend to break. They're very brittle and they break. So you've got to allow the router bit to do the work instead of you pushing and shoving and trying to get things to happen. So if the router bit's not going to do the work, it's obviously blunt. So use on. And so what I've done there is I've just cut half the thickness of the piece of timber. So I've only cut half the way thickness in. When we cut through these, I tend to do, my rotation for this is to cut through there, turn it over towards me, so turn it back, push through again, turn back, push through again, and do my 4 rotations that way. I find that you get less tear out, and it's a much simpler process by starting with somewhere where you've already started to cut. Now, the thing to remember is that the router bit's sitting up there, so don't put your thumb on the back of the piece of material like that and push it through, because you're likely to take the end off your thumb. Very careful of that. So be careful of your safety when you're doing this little process. And so what we've got there now is we've got a nice neat trench all the way around the box. The gap is correct. The size of your lid is the same size all the way around, and it's nice and clean cut too. So now what we do is raise the router bit up. So we're cutting through. Now I just generally cut just enough to come through. And we repeat the process, but this time we do 3 steps. We've got some other things here that we have to use as well to get the last bit off. Okay, so now I've cut through 3 sides. I've got 1 left. There's not a lot, I'll hold it down here where you can see it, there's not a lot of support in that. If I cut through here, the 2 pieces would jam together over the top of the router bit and I'd have a fair bit of damage here. So, make yourself a splitting sleeve. Now this one's a pretty old one. Make sure it's the same size as the box. Okay, so it's the same width as the box. I've got support this side, I've got support this side, and I've got support there. Let's push that through far enough. The whole thing is being supported now. A little bit of tape just to hold it together. I've seen lots of weird ways of doing this, and I found this is probably the simplest way of doing it. And The last little bit is to take the top off. And so that gives me a nice clean surface. This one's a little bit furry because of the rotation of the router bit. So what I'm going to do with that is got my router bit out of the way because I won't need that more. A little bit of sandpaper. This is only 240 grit sandpaper. It's not really coarse. All I'm trying to do is just make sure I've got a perfect surface. I've got a little bit of a lip there. I'm not taking much off. You'll notice I'm rotating the box around. I'm not letting it sit in one way. Just checking. We have it. Same at the top. The top's going to be a little bit more furry because of the way the rotation of the router bit does. It's actually pulling the timber off the top section, pushing it onto the bottom section, if you can understand how that works. So it might need a little bit of extra work. Just a little bit furry. When you have lighter weight timbers, you'll find it is really furry. If you're using hardwoods, some of the yews that we use, some of the oaks that we use, they tend to be close grained. You'll have less of a problem with this. Lovely. Way to check it. Sit that back on there. That's the right way. No. That way. When you put it together, you can't actually see the joint. So that tells me that it's pretty much perfect. The same on this side. Pretty much right. All the grain matches up. Job done. Okay, next step. Put a little base in it. Get rid of some tools. Hope you're enjoying this, because I quite enjoy actually going back and rehashing things. One of the other things about doing stuff on filming it as you're doing it is that if you gift the box to somebody, you can say, well, this is how it was made, and it can be part of the gift. Okay, now the sleeve. What I have to do is I'm going to put a base in there, just like these ones. Get this little red one. So I'm going to make one of those. Same little box. and that goes in there. Now the reason I make it on a piece of plywood, and it's the only time I use a piece of plywood in my boxes, everything else is solid timber. If you don't like the colour, you can throw it away and make a new one. If you don't like it at all, you can have the timber showing in your box. If you want to change the colour, you've already got the base there, so you can take that off and put a different colour on it. So there's a lot of reasons why I make it like that way. And if you just want to clean it, you can pull it out and clean it anytime you want. So we're going to make one of those. This little box has to have a blue one. So I need that. Over to my drop saw, and we'll make a little piece of material to go in the bottom, and then we'll put some blue bays on it. Okay, so my piece of plywood has got one straight edge on it. So let's make a second straight edge. It's only 3mm ply. Retrim that straight edge that we had there. So that's given me a 90-degree angle in here. I'll put that into the corner into my box like that. I want a perfect fit. So there's my mark. Perfect fit. Fit this way. No, that's not good. And a piece off. Fits that way. Fits that way. Over to back to the bench. Now, a little bit of sandpaper. Just want to tidy up my edges. A nice piece of base. Blue base. We've got some blue base here. I'm just going to cut a corner off that. Normally I'd cut it all the way through, right across, and then I'll make half a dozen boxes. And I had a pair of scissors here, you know. But I've only got one box to do, so I'm only going to cut a small piece off this roll of base. Now when I stick this on here, I find the nicest bit and I stick it on the other side. The nicest bit's going to be when you pull the box out. When you pull the piece out, you want the nicest bit showing, so cover up the not so nice bit. Pretty easy stuff to put on. It's self-adhesive. Just drop it on place, make sure you're overlapping all the corners, all the edges. And what I'm doing here is I'm just pressing the whole thing down. So there it is. And now, trim up. Stanley knife. Here's my little piece of base. Now I need a little little tag. And then a short one of these. And you can get this stuff from, where is it, Pamela?
Spotlight.
Spotlight. So you can get that tape from Spotlight.
Or any other haberdasher.
Yeah, oh yeah. A little bit of super glue on here. Don't overdo it. You don't want too much sticking out the end. You don't want it to fray either, so I'll put a little bit of super glue on the end of there. What do I need now? A little bit of tape. I make the tape bit, but I don't ever take it off. You can if you wish. I don't see a need for it to take it off. Just want to take the whole thing down. I know it's super glued in place, but just to super glue it down. I'm working relatively quickly here because I want to get on with the next bit. Once I've got this done, it's then a matter of making the sleeves. Now don't put this in if you haven't got that little tag on there, because if you do, you can't get it out if you've got a piece of material that's a bit of a snug fit. So, good idea, make sure the tag's on it before we put it together. Okay, next step is the sleeves. Now, in the other one of the boxes that I've got there, I'll get it out in a sec. Put it in the way. Lid that goes on that box. Goes there. I'll get my green box. So once I find it where I've got everything. So what? This is my little green box. Same box. I've made three of the sleeves. Now it's just a matter of cutting material. It's just a matter of cutting pieces of material that actually fit snugly into the box, like that. Make them a bit longer than you need. We're going to have 5mm of material sticking out the top of the box, and then it's just a matter of cutting a miter joint on each of the sides. Now there's each of the ends. Now there's lots of ways of doing that. I've got a few techniques that I use. You can use a sander, you can use a plane, you can use a drop saw, you can use a table saw. There are, like I say, there are many ways of doing this. This is the technique that I use to do it. So I've got those three made. I'm just going to make one more to fit. So over to my drop saw. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off the bulk of the miter joint. Now I have a piece of timber, and on the end of it I've got a 45-degree angle cut, like so. So if I slide that up to my blade, and then I clamp that in place, like so. One of the things that I think about when I'm using this is I have my brain set on safety, because I'm going to be holding a piece of timber there. Look where my thumb is, fairly close to the blade of the saw. So you need to be very, very confident with your equipment And you need to make sure that you can see what you're doing and be confident it's not going to move, otherwise I'm going to lose my thumb. So what I've done here, and I'm just going to run, you can see here, before I start, I've got a little red mark there. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I think we can, yeah.
You can just see the mark there, 45-degree mark across the corner, braced up against my fence. Now, people have said to me, well, we can make a proper fence, we can do this, we can do that, and clamp it in place so you don't have your fingers in the way. But I do so many boxes with this size and so many different sizes, it's very difficult to actually get a tool that you can adjust quickly and easily to do one job. So I tend to do it this way, and all I'm doing now is I'm just going to drop that down. And I've cut off most of the 45-degree. You can see there's still a little bit of material left, so it's just a matter now of doing the other end. So you can see there's a 45-degree on there, so all I have to do now is the other end. I'll trim that up. So get my laser set on there. You can see how delicate that is. That moved enough to be able to just burn the end of the timber. It doesn't matter because I'm going to plane it off anyway. So over to my bench again. Now this is where I get out my shooting board.
I love this little piece of equipment.
And it's the cutest little shooting board. And my Veritas low angle plane. Alright, now this is a Veritas low angle plane. I brought the box out so that I could show you what it is. If you're going to purchase one for end grain, this is the one that I use. I'm not sure if you can get, I'm not sure where to get them in Australia. It's American made, or Canadian made, sorry.
Yep, got to get it right,
well,
Canada.
Yeah, sorry, it's made in Canada. So, perfect little plane. I've got a little rat's tail on the end of it. They don't generally come with that. That's this piece here. It just makes it easier for my big hand to hang on to. Normally they've just got that bit. This bit, I should say.
So just that's an attachment that you put on.
This is an attachment that you put on.
Yeah.
Just a handle. You can purchase that as well. So it's just screwed on with a couple of screws.
Ooh.
So it just makes it easier for me. I can grip it and get my hand around it. And this is how we use this. So I've got a piece of sacrificial timber set up here. And it's just a matter of now my piece of timber is way wider than I actually need it. Right? Because then I can cut it down to fit as per. Nice and sharp on my corner. This one off. Just make sure your plane is set correctly. You can see it's only got tiny little shavings. They're not very big. And we are shaving off end grain as well, so it won't be a nice clean shaving in some cases, depending on the timber you're using. Okay, that's our green box that we had. Where did I put my green box? Over here. so there's those three. Sandpaper here. Just a fairy bit on the end of there. Okay, so that's not going to fit yet. It's still a little bit too long. I could force it in, but I don't want to do that. Let's take a bit more off. Okay, now that's going to fit down there quite nicely. I'm not going to push it all the way down because I know it'll go down there. Otherwise it'll be just too hard to get it out for this stage. What I want to do now is I'm going to trim up the end of each of them and then I'm going to round over the top edge. And then get them out.
Need a bit of easing, don't they? Just the slightest bit.
Just the slightest little bit. A bit of sand, just take the furry bit off the edge of that. That's what's causing that. It's just a bit furry there on the end grain. That's better. Okay. So that's finished with my little plane and my shooting board. The tool I'm going to use now is my TV7. Round over the top edge. A little piece of scrap here is always advisable. So I've got a piece of material that's exactly the same thickness, it's the same. And this is going to be my tester. And what I'm going to do is just set it so that it fits perfectly into the bottom of the curve. Adjust it up. I'll have to fix this thing. It's just not giving me anything but grief at the moment. Just adjust it so that it touches both the top and the bottom in the bottom of the radius. A little fiddle to get this one right. I have another fence that I use. Come around that side there. So 11 o'clock, hopefully we'll get this done. Now what I'm doing is I'm adjusting this so that it's just at the bottom of the rebate. Now if I haven't got it right, that's okay, I can adjust it. Okay, ears on. And so what that's done is taken off half the curve. You can see it's taken off one side and not the other. So what we can do there to make it nice and perfect is just flip it over, cut the other side. And that gives me a perfect curve on the top, which is exactly what we're looking for. So now is to choose the bits I want to round over, because the other end we're going to cut that off at the right height. So on that top edge, I'm going to cut that little bit off there because I've got a fault there. So that's the top edge. This one has a little fault here, but I think that'll come off when we round it over. And this one looks pretty good all around. That'll be the top edge of that one. Okay. Now it's just a matter of cutting them to size. This is my green box, this is the one I'm using. I have to find my ruler, it's over here. What I want is about 4 or 5 millimeters protruding out the top of the box, like we have here. You don't have to have that much, you can have less if you like, it's up to you. But I like to have a reasonable amount, because then when you put the lid on, there's plenty of support for the lid.
And enough grip
And
to hold
enough
it.
grip, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice to do that. So if we measure to the bottom with the bays in it, I've got just on 28 millimeters, which means that my little piece has to be, I've got 5 mil past there, so 33 millimeters is probably the width that we need for these. So let's go over to the drop saw. I'll do them all at once. I know we've gone over time a little bit, but I'm trying to get this box finished so that next week we can start the toolbox. Okay, so 33 millimeters. I'm just going to measure one. And the way I measure it is I put the rounded edge up against a surface like that, and then run my ruler up to that as well. Right. And so my 33 millimeters is right there. So I'm going to cut that much off. Now, put them all together. When I put them together, I put two pieces like that. And put the other piece on the bottom. We'll go like that. And that piece goes there, and then I can cut them all at 33 mil. So back to our little box. A little bit tight there for some reason.
Here's sandpaper.
Yes, that's the reason. And there we have our perfect little box. Here's our lid. It goes that way. There's a little corner on there that just needs the dressing up. Is that the right lid? No. Trying to put the wrong lid on it. No wonder. There we go.
Nice.
There we go. Nice snug fit. And that's what it looks like. Putting the wrong lid on. Now, there's one more process we have to go through before we actually start looking at putting a finish on it. I'm not going to do that on camera. You can do your own developing of your finishes. I use CONSTANTIA wood oil on mine, but the exercise was about actually making the little box. So, last little process. Rounding over a bit, and you can get a whole range of these rounding over bits. You can do it any size you like. You don't even have to do it if you don't want to. So, here's one, everybody. And so all I've done is just round over that edge, and I'm just going to get sandpaper just to take off some of the untidy looking little bits. And there you have it. That's our little box. Need to do the top of this one, but basically there's your little box already finished, and it's just a matter of pulling it apart, giving it a light sand, and putting a finish on it. Now, when I say a light sand, most of the time when I'm doing these boxes, all the timber that I have, or all the timber I use, has already been sanded to about 400 or 600 grit sandpaper and made perfectly smooth. You'll notice that there weren't too many errors made in cutting the timber, therefore you don't need to sort of cut your materials and then sand it. Once you start sanding material after you cut joints and things like that, you'll find that nothing fits the way you want it to fit. I found that in the past when making the boxes. If I've have forgotten to sand something and then I go and sand it after I've done all the joint work, then the boxes are not a tight fit and not a snug fit. They have gaps in them where you don't want gaps and things like that. So before you start, and I know with a Gifkins jig you can actually cut things perfectly accurately. I do it all the time. Cutting your joints after you've sanded it to a nice clean finish is probably the best way to go. I heard somebody the other day saying sandpaper was for those people who don't keep their tools in sharp and who can't use planes properly and all that sort of thing. And I thought that comment was a bit of rubbish, because sandpaper's been used for many years, hundreds and thousands of years. Sandpaper's been used for all sorts of different things. In olden times, they used sand on a piece of rock to sand things smooth. So, you know, we're using sandpaper. A lot easier. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that bit. So that's it for this project. What I'll do is these little ones here, I'll just finish them off with a little bit of sanding, and I'll put a coat of oil on it. Next week I'll just show you what they look like when they're finished with the finish on them. So that's it for this one. Next week what I'm going to do, and this is going to be a bit of an experimental thing. People have asking me how to store the jigs, right? Now I store them by putting them in a rack. That because I'm using them all the time, and I don't just use one, I use a whole lot. And I've got all my jigs like that. But if you've just got one jig and you tend to take it to your men's shed or your guild or wherever you go with your thing, or your mate's place, and you want to carry it around, people have said to me, well, how do I, you know, like, you could use the cardboard box, but the cardboard box will eventually fall to pieces on you if it gets wet, or you keep dropping it, or you're opening and closing it all the time. It eventually dissipates. So the idea is to make yourself a toolbox to carry it. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I've never made one. I'm going to have a little play with it, and we're going to work out ways of actually storing the router bits in with the jig. And more than likely we'll have room for a second template. And a pair of backing boards. We'll have to see how we go with it. So it won't be just a small box, it's going to be something that's relatively large. I'll do it out of 12mm material, and we'll see how we go. Now, it might only be camphor but it doesn't matter what timber it is, as long as it's something that we can store the box in and have it nice and safe so that we can carry it around. The style of box is going to be of the same ilk as a Japanese toolbox. It's going to have this style of lid in it, where you build the box similar sort of fashion to this, and it has a lid that will actually fit in like that, and it'll have a wedge, of course, in the corner of it. So it's going to have that style of box. Of course, it's going to have two handles on the end of it. So we'll have a little play with that. During the week, I'll work as hard as I can to get it up to a standard that you'll enjoy and find it easy for you to make. So hopefully that will work out. Now, somewhere along there has been a lot of people who have been asking us if they can contribute to our cause. As I said to you last week, we don't generally demand or want any of that sort of thing, but we have put, for those people who wish to do to join, to you know, send us a $1 or $2. We've put on buy me a cup of coffee or something.
Buy me a coffee.
Buy me a coffee. There are, on a couple of places we've got that there. If you wish to support us that way, you can do that. You don't have to do it monthly. It's when you click onto it, it goes to the month.
It asks.
You can do it once, twice, or
you
3
can do
times.
It, yeah, however you like.
However you like. We do appreciate the fact that you want to contribute to what we do. So I'm just trying to think of how we how it's set up.
Yeah.
On our channel,
Yeah, right. So
If
we've
you
got it
go
on
to our view channel,
the front of our YouTube channel, and it's at the top and underneath the video information for this time. There's there's a link there.
There's a link as well in there.
And Derek's put a link here
and
too.
Derek puts a link up there. He's a good man. So yeah, if you'd like to join us, by all means do so. So anyway.
Gary Wilco says, okay, what about a cup of tea, a milkshake, and Tim Tams? You can do that.
Two Tim Tams, one each.
Thanks everybody.
Okay, thank you everybody, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next week.